In a world where destinies are written and fates are predetermined, there is a young boy named X. Orphaned and without a defined role in any story, he roams through life with a longing for purpose. However, everything changes when he crosses paths with Cinderella and they become friends. One day, as X was returning home after delivering pumpkins in town for his uncle, he is bullied by other children who mock him for having a blank book of fate. Later, X sees a lady crying about an incident where a monster attacked her husband, but it wasn't mentioned in his book of fate. X sympathizes with her but is dismissed by the lady, who believes he wouldn't understand since he is role-less. X meets with Cinderella, who complains about her mistreatment by her stepmother and doubts if her fate will come true. X promises to ensure that her fate of going to the ball, dancing with the prince, and living happily ever after comes true. Their friendship grows stronger. On the night of the ball, Cinderella is left at home to clean. Suddenly, her fairy godmother appears and, with a wave of her wand, transforms Cinderella's attire into a breathtaking dress and adorns her feet with glass slippers. To complete the enchantment, she conjures a magnificent horse-drawn carriage, ensuring Cinderella arrives at the ball in style to catch the prince's attention. X comes across Reina, who is trapped by a tree and being attacked by villains. She tells him to run but he refuses to give up and fights back, showing his determination to save her. Reina gives him a guidance bookmark, which allows him to transform into a hero and easily defeat the villains. Reina reveals that they need to find Cinderella, the main character of the story zone, who is in danger from the Chaos Teller. Cinderella arrives at the palace, filled with excitement. However, as she opens the door, she is startled to see villains inside. Meanwhile, X, still confused about what had just happened, rushes to save Cinderella. On his way, he encounters Dao and Shane, Reina's companions, who also possess a blank book of fate. Reina explains to X that Chaos Tellers are people who alter stories within story zones. X, Reina, Shane, and Dao form a team and set out on a mission to save Cinderella and the story zone. They make their way to the palace, where the Chaos Teller has already taken control, transforming anyone with a book of fate into villains. Upon reaching the palace, they engage in a battle with the villains. X is reassured that everything will be okay, with Shane explaining that once they defeat the Chaos Teller, Reina will return the story zone to normal and those with a book of fate will have no recollection of the incident. As the group proceeds further into the palace, they confront the Chaos Teller, who surprisingly turns out to be Cinderella's fairy godmother, working alongside Loki. The fairy godmother expresses her dissatisfaction with previous Cinderella stories, claiming it didn't have a happy ending. So, she decides that the best way to make sure Cinderella is happy is to put her to sleep forever. Suddenly, she transforms into a monster. In response, the team assumes their respective heroic forms and successfully defeat the fairy godmother and her villains. Afterward, Reina restores everything back to normal. In the end, Cinderella marries the prince, and X joins his newfound crew in their quest to maintain order in Story Zone. They come across a village, where they introduce themselves to the villagers as travelers hunting down Chaos Tellers. Their presence unsettles some villagers, as it was not written in their book of fate that they encounter travelers. Soon after their arrival, a concerned mother approaches them and reports that her little daughter is missing. She explains that her daughter's book of fate foretells that she would be eaten by a wolf. In response, X and his companions offer to find the girl and bring her back home safely. They head into the woods and find the little girl known as Red Riding Hood, hiding in a cave with a food basket. Unknown to X and his friends, she had already been brainwashed by the Chaos Tellers. As they escort Red Riding Hood back home, she explains that she had been hiding because she was afraid of being eaten by a wolf. Dao reassures her, promising that they will do everything in their power to protect her. Red Riding Hood then deceitfully claims that she needs to deliver food to her grandmother's house. The group agrees to accompany her, unaware that it's a trap. When they reach the grandmother's house, a group of villains ambush them, revealing Red Riding Hood's true allegiance. Soon, Red Riding Hood transforms into the Chaos Teller. They summon their individual heroes and engage in battle against the villains. The villains are easily defeated one by one, but Red Riding Hood continuously brings them back. Dao utilizes his Goliath hero to create a path towards Red Riding Hood, allowing X to launch an attack. However, X is quickly overpowered by Red Riding Hood's fire attacks. Reina immediately heals X and hurries to confront Red Riding Hood. Once she defeats the Chaos Teller, Reina uses her powers to restore the story zone back to normal, allowing everyone to resume their regular lives. The group continues their journey through the story zones and meets a man named Don Quixote. He believes he is a knight meant to save people and follow the principles of chivalry. X and the group soon realize that Don Quixote is the main character of the story zone. However, the villagers in the zone dislike Don Quixote, thinking he lies and makes up stories about Chaos Tellers. Later that night, X encounters Loki, who reveals that main characters like Don Quixote are just puppets without their own will. Loki quickly disappears before Reina arrives. The following day, a windmill villain arrives in the village, unleashing a destructive tornado. While everyone seeks shelter, Don Quixote bravely remains to confront the villain. However, he is eventually overwhelmed and carried away by the powerful tornado. The rest of the group transforms into their hero forms, engaging in a battle against the villain. After the fight, Reina restores order to the story zone. The group proceeds to the next story zone and finds themselves on an island. While swimming, the boys find a man whom they rescue from the water. The person introduces himself as John Silver, and claims to be the lone survivor of his ship. He reveals that his fate is to help a young boy locate a dead pirate's treasure. The group volunteers to assist him in finding the treasure, navigating through various booby traps along the way. Shortly after, they encounter someone who had been tailing them, revealing himself to be the little boy Silver had mentioned. The boy scurries into a cave and hides, with the crew giving chase. Inside the cave, the boy warns them that Silver is a villain who used to work for the pirate. Suddenly, Silver seals the entrance, trapping them. However, they manage to escape the cave and pursue Silver, eventually discovering that he is the Chaos Teller within this story zone. As they reach the beach, they find Silver's ship. On seeing treasures, the little boy rushes inside, but he undergoes an immediate transformation, becoming a villain under Silver's control. Silver emerges and questions why he can't transform the entire crew into villains as well. As he begins to transform, the group unleashes their heroes. Dao faces off against Silver while the others engage in combat with the villains Silver created. During the intense battle between Dao and Silver, Silver reveals that his Book of Fate foretells that he can never become like his pirate master or attain the treasure he desires, so he seeks to defy this prophecy. The fight rages on, and just when Silver believes he has the upper hand, Dao summons the Rain of Sunshine, ultimately defeating Silver. Soon after, Reina restores everything back to its normal state. The group suddenly finds themselves in a different story zone and suspects they may have entered the wrong one because Reina doesn't sense a Chaos Teller. Just as they begin to retrace their steps, they hear a rustling in the bushes, and to their surprise, 7 dwarfs emerge, pouncing on X and mistaking him for a prince. They excitedly bring X to Snow White, convinced that he is the prince destined to awaken her from her slumber with a kiss and marry her. Despite the group's attempts to explain that X is not the prince, Snow White and the dwarfs persist in referring to him as such. The dwarfs start narrating the story of Snow White's past. They reveal how Snow White's mother, the queen, banished her to the forest out of fear that Snow White's beauty would surpass her own. Thankfully, the dwarfs found her and brought her safely to their cabin. When the queen discovered that Snow White was still alive, she attempted to poison her with an apple, causing her to fall into a deep sleep. It was then that X arrived and revived her. Determined to help Snow White, the group decides to accompany her back to the castle. Snow White continues to express her love for her mother, despite the hardships she endured, which puzzles the group. As they approach the castle, the queen sees Snow White in the mirror and prepares another poisonous apple, as her previous attempt had surprisingly failed. The queen warmly welcomes them, expressing gratitude for her daughter's safe return, and invites them to a grand feast. While Reina agrees, while the rest of the group remains suspicious. Reluctantly, they agree to follow the queen and join the feast. After the meal, they request dessert, and the queen serves them apple. Dao recognizes the apple as the one mentioned by the dwarfs, the very apple that had poisoned Snow White before. The 7 dwarfs quickly intervene just as Snow White is about to take a bite, telling her of the queen's evil plans. Eventually, the queen confronts Snow White, asking if she now hates her. Surprisingly, Snow White declares her eternal love for her mother, refusing to hold any hatred, even after the attempted poisoning. This response confuses the queen, who had expected Snow White to seek revenge. Touched by her daughter's forgiveness, they reconcile. The group then leaves the castle, and everything returns to normal. The group travels to a very cold forest, where they find a girl collapsed in the snow. They take her to a cottage where the blind owner lets them stay for the night. The girl tells them about her friend Kai, who has been taken away by the Snow Queen. The group decides to help her find Kai. They arrive at the Snow Queen's castle, and Kai begs them to leave, explaining that he left with the Snow Queen because his book of fate binds him to her. The Snow Queen then appears and breaks the ice beneath the castle, causing them to fall into a hole. They find their way out and meet Kai again. Gerda begs him to come with them, but he refuses to leave with them. He says that he made a deal with the Snow Queen to stay in her frozen castle forever in exchange for lifting the curse she placed on Gerda, which caused her to lose her memories of him and become emotionless. Kai then triggers a memory from their past that breaks the curse. Suddenly, the Snow Queen arrives to take Kai back, and the group transforms into new heroes to fight her. The Snow Queen's blizzard attack freezes them in place, but they are able to break free and attack her with their own weapons. In the end, Shane is able to defeat her with a powerful arrow. The blind lady who had given them shelter then appears and reveals herself to be the mastermind behind the whole thing. She says that she wants to help sad characters break free from their fate in the story zone. Loki then appears and addresses the lady as Curly, the priestess of chaos. He takes her away with him, leaving the group to wonder what had just happened. Reina leads the group to the next story zone, where she senses the presence of Chaos Tellers. This story zone brings back a lot of memories for Dao and Shane, as it is their homeland and the place where they agreed to become siblings. Soon, they hear voices and rush to the scene. They find a boy trying to fight off villains. Dao immediately jumps in and saves the boy. The boy introduces himself as Momotaro, the main character of the story zone. He asks the group to help him defeat some monsters called Oni, as humans and Oni have an eternal rivalry. The group agrees to help Momotaro, and they accompany him to an island where the Oni are located. While planning their attack, Shane tries to intervene, explaining that not all Oni are evil, but Momotaro doesn't listen. He jumps out and tries to attack the Oni, but Dao knocks him unconscious. The group then meets with the leader of the Oni, who says she is willing to make peace and move to another village where other Oni are living. The group decides to help the Oni get to the village before Momotaro regains consciousness. As Momotaro wakes up, he is met by his grandfather, who tells him that Dao is on the side of the Oni and that he killed the previous Momotaro, who he was a right-hand man to. He calls Dao a betrayer and then asks Momotaro to go after Dao and the Oni. The group, alongside the Onis, arrive at the village and find that Momotaro has already destroyed the village and turned some of the Oni into villains. Momotaro then tells the group about Dao's betrayal and how he killed the previous Momotaro, but they don't believe him. They instead defend Dao. Dao breaks down and explains that he had been accepted to work for the previous Momotaro, and during that time, he was treated like family. The Oni attacked one day, and Momotaro died while saving him. Dao blames himself for Momotaro's death, claiming that his coming into Momotaro's life had changed his fate. The Chaos Teller, which is both Momotaro's grandmother and grandfather, arrives and turns into a huge monster that is ready to destroy the Oni and anyone on their side. The group transforms into their heroes and battles the monster, emerging victorious. The group is skeptical about whether to restore the story zone, as it would lead to the humans and Oni rivalry, but Reina is convinced it is the right thing to do. She restores the story zone, and moments later, the group settles down to eat. Dao recalls the previous Momotaro telling him to make new connections, and he snaps back into reality and joins the team to eat. The group continues their journey and soon arrives at a hot desert. Reina passes out from the heat, but a young man named Aladdin appears and offers her water. He also steals from her in the process. When she notices, she goes after him and slaps him in anger. Aladdin immediately becomes infatuated with her boldness and asks to marry her. Later, he reveals that he was tricked by an evil wizard and trapped in a cave, where he found a magic lamp with a genie whose powers he used to escape and become rich. However, the Sultan stole his lamp, so he is broke again. He mentions that his book of fate states that he is to get the lamp back and marry a beautiful princess. Soon after, the group notices that the story zone will collapse soon and they rush to retrieve Aladdin's lamp. At night, the desert becomes freezing and Reyna collapses again. Aladdin leads them to an oasis where they set camp. When X asks why she pushes herself so hard, Tao explains that Reyna wants revenge on Loki for destroying her home where she was a princess and lived happily. Suddenly, they notice a group of villains approaching. Everyone goes to fight, leaving Reyna with Aladdin. However, when one of the villains gets close, Aladdin tries to protect her, shielding her with his body. The others arrive only to watch a dying Aladdin reveal that he is happy he chose his own fate. The next day, Reyna stands over the grave of Aladdin, feeling devastated. X approaches and inquires whether retuning the story zone would bring him back. They explain that the story zone would only replace him with someone very similar. X then suggests that they find the magic lamp to bring Aladdin back to life, and they agree. They set out to find the Sultan. In town, Reyna and her friends encounter Loki once again. She furiously blames him for Aladdin's death and threatens to make him pay. He responds by accusing her of being motivated by her hatred for him. Almost immediately, the Sultan uses the genie's power to transport them to a room and attack them. Reyna leads the charge, but she quickly backs away from the genie's fire attack. Shane then attacks with a spell, but the genie divides himself and evades it. When they provoke the genie, he bombards them with a series of attacks that create a cover for Reyna to attack the Sultan. The Sultan attacks with his magic staff. The Sultan is defeated and the genie disappears. However, their plan is shattered as the lamp got destroyed, leaving Reyna with no choice but to reset the story zone before it finishes collapsing. In tears, Reyna resets the story zone and returns everything as it should be. In a battle between England and France, the English people join forces with the Chaos Tellers to fight against the French. Just when the French are about to lose, a young lady named Jean appears, and with the help of X, Reyna, Shane, and Tao, defeats the villains, saving her country. When they return from the battle, Jean is hailed as a hero. She gives a speech to the adoring public, vowing to continue fighting for her country. X is amazed that someone their age can achieve so much. Jean and her henchmen prepare for the next battle, and X follows her to ask why she is so confident and if her victory was predetermined. Jean doesn't answer. Later, X meets Curly, who tells him that Jean is destined to be executed and there's nothing they can do to help her. X confronts Jean about her fate, and she admits that she knows about it but doesn't care because she wants to defend her people. Suddenly, the Chaos Teller appears and attacks them. X tries to protect Jean but gets hurt and can't move. Jean is captured. The group arrives and X tells them to go save Jean. They find Jean's henchman, who tells them that his unit was killed. They continue and find Jean tied up, about to be executed. They fight the Chaos Teller but can't defeat him because he neutralizes their powers. Meanwhile, Curly visits X and offers him a place called the Church of Fortem, where he can fulfill his true purpose if he joins them. She says they all have blank books of fate there. X doesn't respond but gets up to save Jean. However, he is weak from the Chaos Teller's magic. Curly heals him, surprising him. In England, while the Chaos Teller threatens to eliminate them all, the group notices X and quickly creates a diversion to allow him to sneak up from behind and rescue Jean. Together, they launch a powerful counterattack and ultimately defeat the Chaos Teller. Jean is released from the spell, and Reyna restores things to how they were before the Chaos Teller's interference. From afar, the group watches as Jean leads the French soldiers into the next stage of the war, filled with hope and inspiration. They embark on their next adventure and meet Mad Hatter and March Hare, who invite Reyna to join their Mad Tea Club's tea party. Alice, accompanied by her soldiers, arrives to arrest them but is interrupted by Reyna, who expresses her admiration for Alice. However, this version of Alice lacks a sense of adventure. Later, they witness Alice and her deputy punishing a villager for daydreaming during work. This prompts them to confront Alice, who reveals that she was chosen by the Queen of Hearts to mature rather than indulge in childish fantasies. During their conversation, Reyna brings up Alice's embarrassing past and how she ended up in Wonderland by chasing a rabbit through a hole. Alice becomes embarrassed as a result, which allows Mad Hatter and March Hare to seize the opportunity and kidnap her. After searching for Alice, they locate her in a cave. Reyna manages to persuade Alice to return by promising to bake her cookies. As Reyna shares her adventurous tales, Alice begins to open up. However, their conversation is abruptly interrupted by the White Rabbit, who abducts Mad Hatter and takes him to face a trial presided over by the Queen of Hearts, which ultimately means a death sentence. Alice takes the lead and decides to organize a rescue mission for their captured companion. Inside the palace, they find themselves surrounded, only to realize that Alice had orchestrated their capture all along. It becomes evident that the Queen is the Chaos Teller, responsible for manipulating Alice with falsehoods. Without delay, the Queen passes swift judgment of death on Raina and the others. As they all transform to their heroes, the Queen uses her heart magic to attack them one by one, causing everyone to fall. However, Raina and X transform into new heroes. This time, Raina skillfully defends against the Queen's attacks while simultaneously creating opportunities for X to deliver decisive blows, defeating the Queen. Raina then attempts to retune the Wonderland Story Zone, but to their surprise, it doesn't work. Suddenly, Mad Hatter undergoes a transformation, assuming the form of a beast known as the Jabberwock, while Alice is kidnapped by Loki. Jabberwock and Loki launch an attack, dividing the group with a wall of fire. Raina and X manage to escape and regroup with Shane and Dow. Raina recalls the Jabberwock, referring to the place as the Looking Glass Story Zone. Suddenly, the Mad Hatter joins their conversation. They explain their desire to defeat the Red Queen, and the Mad Hatter volunteers to draw a map to her palace. Arriving at the Red Queen's castle, they are greeted by Loki and Curly, who have Alice captive. Curly once again expresses her desire to free those with predetermined fates and those burdened with blank books, facing unimaginable suffering. X disagrees, explaining that everyone has feelings. A standoff ensues and Loki summons the Jabberwock to fight on his behalf. The Jabberwock declares that by absorbing Alice, he will become the main character of the story zone. Shane takes aim at the Jabberwock's eye, blinding him and rendering him powerless against Raina's attack. With the Jabberwock out of the way, Loki reveals his wild crest in a blank book. He undergoes a transformation, becoming Chaos Aladdin, and Aladdin with the genie's powers. Chaos Aladdin creates clones of himself and launches a forceful blast that sends the group flying. However, when X sees the defeated look on Raina's face, he remembers his promise to her and suddenly, he hears a voice urging him to stand up and call his name. Just then, X rises to his feet and summons his new hero, Ludwig Grimm, a legendary storyteller. Ludwig Grimm displays his overwhelming power, effortlessly slashing the Jabberwock with one hand in his pocket, and then confronts Loki. Loki is astonished that X can connect with an unseen hero. As Loki creates more clones, X uses a skill to make Loki vanish completely. With Loki defeated, Alice is freed from her curse, and Raina restores the story zone to its proper state.